Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Mind Over Finger podcast. This is episode 194. I have an amazing guest for you in this episode, Gloria Lum, cellist with the LA Philharmonic, as well as the founder of Audition Confidential, a coaching container where Gloria helps cellists prepare for auditions that feel fulfilling and are successful. We had a really fantastic conversation. We talked about her journey of discovering her unique learning style in the middle of these struggle of traditional practice routine. We talked about her insight on audition preparation, of course, including her five pillar system for what she calls holistic readiness. We discussed the importance of mindset in music performance and that need to bridge the gap between practice and the stage. And we dove into one of my favorite topics, which is the value of patience in practice, as well as acceptance and also slow practice, which, as you know, is one of my favorites. And she has a lot of great tips for us for practicing and preparing for performance. So there is a lot of great insight for you. And before I pass the mic to Gloria, I want to make sure that you are signed up and ready for my free 3-day workshop called Mastering the Stage. In this 3-day workshop, we're going to dive in the psychology of performance preparation. We're going to go beyond all the practice strategies and we're going to find out what works for you and what doesn't. We're going to overcome your stumbling blocks and we're going to devise a plan for you to feel ready and confident as you step on stage. So, this is absolutely free. It's absolutely transformative. And you can sign up by going to mindoverfinger.com. And I'm going to have the link here below in the episode description. And I'm going to meet you for that April 4th through the 6th at 11 a.m. Central. So make sure to sign up today. And if you can't make it live, you can watch the replays. But by making it live, you can ask specific questions and get guidance that is tailored for you. So I hope to see you inside Mastering the Stage. And now I hope you enjoy this conversation with the fantastic Gloria Lum from Audition Confidential. Gloria Lum, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on the Mind Over Finger podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel very honored.
Gloria, you have such a wonderful, interesting journey. I would love for my listeners to hear it from your mouth. Please tell us about how that artistic path has unfolded for you.
You know, I have to say that I feel like I've been on the orchestral path all my life. I grew up in Berkeley, California, which had a wonderful music program starting in the third, fourth grade, where I started to play the cello. Although I really wanted to play the clarinet because I was fascinated by all those keys. But my brother said to me, "Oh, play the cello. Nobody plays the cello." I thought, "Oh, okay." So that was how I picked the instrument. Um, but even from a very early age in grade school, we had little orchestras, we had string ensembles, and I just really loved that feeling of sitting in a group and being part of something. Now, Berkeley school system has, like I said, a wonderful orchestral program. There were tons and tons of my colleagues and fellow students who played instruments. There were a couple of youth orchestras in the Bay Area, one of which was called Oakland Symphony Youth Orchestra, which I joined. And I think there was always this incredible sense of camaraderie that I felt with my colleagues, with my friends, and we just had a lot of fun. And then there's this wonderful conductor named Dennis DiCateau, who was the conductor of the Oakland Symphony Youth Orchestra. And he really instilled upon us as young people, discipline, showing up, and being respectful of the music and of each other. And I think that just really set me up for my orchestral sort of life. One of the incredible things that happened is our youth orchestra, when I was 16, was invited to go to the Herbert von Karajan Youth Orchestra Festival in Berlin, where our orchestra took the silver medal. So, it was an incredibly exciting time with lots and lots of music and interest. And I feel like when you're at that time in your life, you're just like a sponge. And so that was wonderful. Berkeley High School also had a wonderful orchestra, and I just have to give a shout out to my conductor at the time, who scheduled. He actually scheduled Mahler too, you know, which I think looking back is just kind of crazy that we actually did Mahler too with a high school orchestra. I think we only had two ringers, but again, this feeling of sitting in an orchestra, being part of something greater than myself, and being surrounded by the sound is something that I think really led me along the orchestral path.
Isn't that amazing how these youth orchestra experiences have such a profound impact on us? I really resonate with what you said because that's what it was for me is the way making music with my friends and playing this incredible repertoire made me feel is something that shaped who I am today, without a doubt.
I think that it's not unlike soccer teams, you know, growing up and getting that sense of teamwork where you are part of something greater and you are all working towards a goal. You know, that's kind of what life is all about because nobody goes through this life alone, you know, and it's great to have support and realize that you can rely on the people around you. I have to tell you, you know, when I go out and we were playing quartets or chamber music, you know, I feel like, okay, we're going to go out there and have each other's back. You know, we're going to be there for each other, you know, and that is how it is in an orchestra. It's certainly how it is in chamber music. And I think that was really instilled upon me in me at a very early age, this sense of shared responsibility,
Mm,
shared goals, shared joy.
yeah. Yeah. And it really underlines the importance of education, especially access to education.
Absolutely. And I feel super, super grateful and thankful that I was in a situation where there was lots and lots of music, wonderful musicians, wonderful mentors who helped shape us all and who gave us that access, not only to themselves as wonderful teachers and musicians, but, you know, in like orchestras and youth orchestras and that kind of thing, which is so incredibly important, not only as a musician, but, you know, growing up, just becoming an adult, a responsible, you know, hopefully adult who gives back to their community.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, without a doubt, music impacts those facets of our personalities so powerfully.
Yes, it's true.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a California girl through and through. You went to University of Southern California.
I did. Yes,
How
I
is
did.
Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to ask, how were those college days for you?
You know, I actually started at UCLA without being, I was a music major, but I had made the decision that I really didn't want to go to a conservatory because I had so many other interests. And so I'm really thankful that I spent 2 years at UCLA where I took every liberal arts course I could possibly, every art history course I could, you know, I took German, I took English, I took political science, and I had so much fun. But after 2 years, I said, you know what, this is great. I think I'm going to become a musician. At the time, I was studying with Gabarito privately, and he said, why don't you come to USC? So I did transfer over to USC and into the music school, which is a very different um, sort of place as a young student. You know, USC had a great orchestra. Daniel Lewis was the conductor at the time. We played Mahler six. You know, this is the thing, playing Mahler in young orchestras. And I just think just doing this deep dive into orchestral music and performance just really helped me to pinpoint that that was the way I wanted to make my living. Um, and it was interesting because at the time, I remember we had a discussion. I had a discussion with my teacher, and he said, "So, what are you going to do, you know, when you graduate?" And I thought, well, I guess I'll play in an orchestra. And I think he said, "Oh, yeah, you could do that." And I still think that there's a little bit of a prejudice against going into orchestral music because as string players, and you know, we play concertos, we play sonatas, you know, there's chamber music, and while that is all fun, you know, realistically, how many people actually make a living playing in a quartet? Very few. And it's a freelance sort of life. I kind of needed the stability, and I really did love orchestral music. So I'm glad that I didn't feel put off by somebody who wasn't maybe 100% behind the idea of an orchestral career. I think at that time it was not considered to be like the top of one's profession.
Mhm. It's
Uh,
so crazy how someone's input like this can impact the course of one's life, and I'm so happy that you felt pretty secure in your own convictions and did not let that veer you off course.
Yeah, I also feel like when I was at USC, I kind of flew under the radar because I was a really good player, but I wasn't like a star, and so I didn't have that kind of pressure on me where people are saying, wow, that person's going to really go like be a soloist or something.
Mm,
I was like, nah, it's not for me. I don't think I was that talented. And I don't think that I had the grit and determination to really try and go that way. So I think that was okay. I felt like there wasn't eyes on me necessarily. So it was easier in many ways to kind of do my own thing, go through my own path and say, this is right for me. Maybe it's not for anybody else, but I felt very certain that that was the path I was going to take.
Thank you for sharing this. I feel like it's so important for some people to hear this and really take it in that it's not always necessarily those who are dubbed, as you said, the star students who are part of this exclusive club who is eventually going to, for lack of a better expression, make it or create a life for them in the arts. And it really shows how when we move forward with our own convictions on our path, it really leads to amazing things, as we can see with your career. I also love that you shared about taking a couple years to give into other interests and expand the horizon of, what is happening outside of the music world. I feel like sometimes for some of us, my path was very directly into the world of music. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'm curious to know what would have happened if I had explored other fields before I fully dedicated myself to music. I mean, I'm very happy with how things have worked out for sure. But I think that, as you said, that sometimes maybe orchestra back then wasn't seen as, the way to go. Nowadays, sometimes there is a stigma attached to not being serious and not going straight into music, conservatory or music education. So thank you for sharing this. I think this was really important for the listeners to hear as well.
I have to make a confession, which is I was never the kind of player that could do like 6 hours in the practice room and just like I just couldn't do it. That wasn't sort of how my brain worked. Um, and I would make the excuse, I think it's important for a successful musician to experience all sorts of things. So that means
Mm,
maybe I'll go out for a walk today or something like that. Um, I think in the end it worked out really well. Maybe a little bit of that was due to my like lack of complete dedication. And I just knew that for myself, that sitting in the practice room for hours and hours was not going to work for me. So I really encourage people to find their particular way of learning. And
mm.
for me, it was like spreading a wide net. And I really feel very, very happy that I have had a big background in literature and art history because I feel like it gives me a lot more sort of things to work with and think about now that I am a professional musician, and when I think about how do I want a phrase to sound? Well, maybe it should look like Monet, or maybe it should sound like Shakespeare, things like that. And I just think that a wider sort of education just makes us more complete human beings and better musicians. And also because so much of what we're trying to do as musicians is to really connect with those human emotions. And those human emotions happen in art, they happen in literature, obviously in music. And I feel like the more available, the more emotions and knowledge you have available to you makes you a better musician, more interesting musician, hopefully.
So well put. So well put. I love what you said about finding your way of learning. And that's a great segue in another topic that I was really curious to approach with you, which is that audition process, because you have a wonderful um,
what would we call it? Program. You have a
program.
wonder yes, with the Audition Confidential. And I'd love to hear as well about your audition journey and what led into Audition Confidential.
Sure. I took my very first audition when I was a senior at USC, and it was for the San Francisco Symphony. And I had had the good luck to work for the first semester of my senior year with Ron Leonard, because Gabarito had gone on sabbatical. And so Ron was taking 4 students, and he was fairly new to the Philharmonic as the principal at the time. So I like ran down there and signed up with him. And Ron really taught me so much in terms of how to listen to myself. And so I had a wonderful 12 weeks with him. And when I decided to take the San Francisco audition, I asked permission, of course, from my teacher. Would it be okay if I worked through with excerpts with Mr. Leonard? He said, oh, sure, fine. And so I remember going to Ron's dressing room backstage at the Music Center, and we would go through the excerpts that the San Francisco Symphony had sent me. And of course, I didn't know the first thing about excerpts. And I thought, well, I'll practice my Dvorak, and that'll be great. So I got there, and I played my Dvorak, and I think they put like Heldenleben up, and I thought, ooh, I don't think I really practiced enough. But in my preparation, one of the wonderful things that Ron would do is I would put up an excerpt, and he'd say to me, the reason why they're asking this is they want to
Mm.
hear this, or they're waiting for you to rush here, or make sure you don't do this. So he gave me very specific um, information about the excerpts. And I thought, oh my God, this is like cheating on a test. This is fantastic. And I thought, this is great. So I kind of became hooked on that. And I think after I left school, there were a couple of other auditions I took, and I reached out to Michael Grabanier, who was the principal of San Francisco Symphony, and I took lessons with him, kind of going through the same process. And so I guess at the end of my first year out of school, I did land a job with the Denver Symphony. And that was fantastic. Here I was living in a new city, young, single, paying my own way with an orchestral job. That is so cool. But I thought this is not the end of the road for me. I thought I still had greater ambitions. I wanted to go on to a more major symphony orchestra. And I think one of the most important things I did was I became very, very close friends with the assistant principal cellist at the time, who's a wonderful musician, wonderful cellist. And we spent so much time like listening to music, playing for each other, just talking about things like phrasing and
Mm.
singing. He had a background in singing, and it really opened up my ears and my imagination to really have this very close sort of working relationship with a friend who I could kind of think about things with and say, what about this? And we would, play for each other. What about that? Try this, try that, and it was like an incredible workshop. So for 5 years, I played in Denver Symphony, and David and I were just very close, and we would continue, I think, both of our sort of musical education. And so I took the Philharmonic audition, and I got it, so even though I actually had the flu on that day, but I was able to kind of power through and say, well, I just don't want to fall over because I have the flu and I'm sick, which sometimes takes your attention away from like the enormity of an audition. It's just like my only goal was to get out there and not fall over. So I would say that hopefully your listeners who are thinking about taking auditions are not going to do it when they have the flu. But I think the idea of not worrying so much about every little thing that you do and how it's going to go, to put yourself outside of the actual, mechanics of playing is a great way to think about an audition.
Yeah.
Because as we all know, the preparation for an audition is so intense because you are thinking about every bow, every breath, every, shift. And we get so into the actual technical aspect of it, which of course we have to, that sometimes it's really hard to get out. And then that becomes what we think about when we're actually going into an audition.
Yes. Yes. I 100% agree with this. Yes. And that speaks volume about your level of preparation for this audition and the fact that if every single logistical event is not going exactly as we would have wanted it to be, it
Mhm.
does not mean that it's not going to go well.
Right. Yes, that's true. There are so many other aspects that happen when you're sitting on stage, just about to start your concerto, and you're thinking, oh my God, can I get it all together? And I was thinking about this the other day, that the brutal reality is we practice hundreds and thousands of hours perfecting our craft, and you get out on stage for an audition and you have 5 minutes to show everything you have done, everything you have worked on, or has to come together in those 5 minutes. And it's not like, oh, maybe in 10 minutes it'll come together. It's like now from the beginning. And I was thinking, what other profession has this kind of intense scrutiny? And I have to have it right now. And if I don't play well in 5 minutes, I'm out of here and I've wasted, whatever, which of course you don't, we can get into that later. And I was thinking, if you are like a NBA basketball player and you're like running down the court and somebody passes you a ball, and it's amazing to see what they do. The other thing I was thinking is, if you're a surgeon and you have your hands in somebody's body, and something happens, you have to bring all of your skill and experience and knowledge to fix it right then.
Yeah.
While we don't have life and death within our hands, we do have to be able to make those incredible decisions and kind of deal with whatever is coming at us. I mean, as a musician, things happen during concerts, good things, bad things, and you have to be like right on top of it and know, how am I going to like make this happen or make this better or respond to my colleague because they just played the most beautiful phrase and I want to play it like that too, which is maybe a little bit different than what I've been practicing. So this idea of flexibility and being so prepared that your instrument, the music, and you can just go out there and go, yes, I'm ready. It takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of preparation. All those things go into how to prepare the best you can for any audition.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit, because you are the audition queen. So tell us about Audition Confidential. How did it unfold? How did it happen? What led you to create this program?
Well, I have played in the Philharmonic for many, many years. And for half of my time there, I have been on the audition committee, either as a member or as the chair. And I think auditions, I've always been fascinated by them just because they're so intense. And a lot of things that I realized was, we have a lot of wonderful players who come and play auditions. And I think, and the whole committee will say, wow, they were great. If only they had done X, Y, or Z. And sometimes it's very specific to an excerpt, like, they just ran right over that rest, or, they didn't make room for the flute, who has this beautiful line, and they're not hearing it. So one of the most important things, I think, for any person taking an audition to realize is that the people on the other side play every instrument. They're not just cellists for a cello or violins for a violin. I mean, yes, you will have a preponderance of them, but you may have a flute player, you may have a trumpet player, you may have a percussionist. And so what is happening when you're playing your audition is, we're sitting back there, we're hearing our own parts to your excerpt. And if you don't make room for our parts, you are not necessarily out, but it's like, oh, okay, this person doesn't really hear what else is going on. And because, we're given one line, that's your excerpt, but you have to realize that there's an entire orchestra that's playing with you, and you need to know their parts as well as yours. So when we talk about phrasing and rest and letting your colleagues kind of play their line, even though they're not there on stage with you, the rest of the panel is hearing that line. So these are the really subtle parts, I think, of playing on audition that I felt people don't know these things, and they're not hard to learn. And how would you possibly get that very specific sort of knowledge? Well, you want to study with excerpts of somebody who plays in an orchestra. So I
Right.
thought, this is something that's needed. And I think with the pandemic and the advent of Zoom, it's like now we have the ability to work with incredible teachers from all over the world, and you don't have to fly to like New York or Boston or LA to study with somebody. You can do it online. And I think it is just so important that this kind of knowledge be available to people, because it's not rocket science and it's like basic. And I think that when you are going to invest so much of your time, your energy, and your money into taking auditions, why not do it in a way that actually will give you a leg up? Go ahead, study with somebody. If you can't study with someone, find an online course, really do a deep dive into these things, because that will set you up in a way that you would not have known otherwise. Because playing excerpts is very, very specific knowledge, especially for string players, especially for section string players, because we're not soloists. And unlike a principal flute audition or a principal trumpet audition, that's a different kind of playing. I mean, they still have to have all the skills, obviously, but as a section string player, you have to be able to blend. You have to still show your artistic and musical personality, but at the same time, you need to be completely aware of all the other things that go on around you. We're not the soloists, so it's a little bit different. And there are really sort of fine lines that you need to kind of know about how to navigate. Well, should I take more time here, or what's the right tempo here, or, all these sorts of things that I know many, many musicians have questions about. So when I created this company, I thought, I have a lot to share, and I'm happy to share it. I love to teach, and I want to let people know that this kind of information, specific information, is what you need in order to really be successful. And you can't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is, I have many, many years of playing in an orchestra, so I know what I'm listening for. But if you are a young player coming out of school, there is just no way you can know what I know. You may be the greatest musician, you may be the greatest, technical, player and all that sort of stuff, but playing in an orchestra is kind of a different animal. And to get into an orchestra is different than playing a concerto.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And as someone who really believe in coaching, believe in why white knuckling it when there's someone with expertise who can help me, I completely agree with you. It goes to what you were saying earlier about the teacher who was telling you about the purpose behind each excerpt. Those are the things we need to know.
Right. I have to say, I am a little bit of an excerpt geek because of what I do, but also what I love about every excerpt is in every excerpt, there is a world that you inhabit. Like Debussy, we talk about, the color and the sweep, and we use our bow in a different way. I see Monet, I see, waves, the whole thing, and Brahms is very different. And each excerpt is like a dive into a different world. And within every excerpt, I want to use my bow differently. I want to use different vibrato. I'm thinking about shifts in a different way. The phrasing may change. And so I feel like when you study excerpts, you can become such a great player without having necessarily to put in, 50 million hours on Dvorak concerto, which it's great too. But I love the variety. I love the imagination that you really need to bring to every excerpt to make them alive and to make them different. And one more thing is, when you look at an excerpt list, let's say you see everything from Beethoven to Strauss to Debussy to Mendelssohn to Mozart. Every orchestra is looking for someone who understands those styles and has the flexibility in their technique and their playing and their imagination to bring each one of those very different styles and feelings to life. So having that flexibility really comes with having the imagination, that goes along with each one of those excerpts. And they're different for each excerpt.
Yeah. When you and I were going back and forth and we were preparing for this conversation, you mentioned in one of the emails the mental and artistic side of things, and how for you, I think I might want to quote you on this if you allow me, because you said it so beautifully. You said there's an evolution to how I think about preparation and how the mental and artistic side has really become a much more important part of what I think audition preparation should include. That's so beautifully put. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think that's on point.
You know, when I first started thinking about teaching excerpts, a lot of it was very technical. You know, as a cellist, I could say that's out of tune, try this fingering, try that bowing. But as I worked more and more with people, I realized that, you know, we all come to this very intense situation with very different abilities. I came up with what I call my 5 pillar system, which is quickly organization, technical, mental, artistic, and physical. And within each of these 5 different pillars, you know, we do a deep dive into what are the kind of things you need to do to really organize yourself so you can get up and just start doing it. A lot of times people say, I have an audition in 6 weeks. How do I begin to organize? So we talk about that. Technical is obviously, you know, the sort of the nuts and bolts of it, but also a lot of what we do is talk about like how to practice. You know, I know, Renee, you're really big into like different ways of practicing, slow practicing, practicing with a metronome, practicing in little bits and pieces. So we cover that. I think for me, what I find the most interesting is the mental and the artistic aspects of audition preparation. Because as we all know, and this has happened to all of us, we get out on stage and think, oh my God, do I play the cello? Or something like, how does this go? You know, sure that we are really like in sync with everything takes a tremendous amount of mental preparation, as you know, and so, you know, we talk a lot about visualization. We talk about even affirmations. I talk a lot about how you sort of blend your mental conversation in your head all the time, even in practice, because I feel like what happens to us if we haven't taken care of the mental aspect of audition preparation is I'm ready to go. You know, technically, I think it's right there. And then we sit down and then you have your little person, my little devil on my shoulder who goes, are you sure you really worked hard enough? And here comes that shift. Are you going to be able to make that, you know, and it's like, who's talking? You know, who's
Right.
saying that stuff? So one of the things I love to do is when I'm practicing, I really work on positive reinforcement for myself. You know, like, yes, that was great. Oh, that sounds so beautiful. And when we pair, and I have no scientific basis for this, just sort of my own feeling, when I'm playing and I can feel in my body, yes, this is how it sounds. This is the right vibrato. This is how the bow feels when I'm pulling it across the string. I'm going to say to myself, this sounds great. This sounds fantastic, you know. And I think it's really important because I know that when I do a physical act, whatever I was thinking at the time absolutely is right there. So I love this idea of pairing the physical and the mental in practice so that when we are under stress, the voice that comes to talk to us is the positive one and not the negative one. So
Yes.
that is an incredibly important part of that. The fourth pillar is artistic. You know, that's all about imagination. You know, is it a color? Is it an emotion? One of the things I love to do, and I think my clients hate me when I do this, is it's like, tell me a story, you know, and walk me through your excerpt, you know, and every little thing. I mean, I think like opening a Beethoven 5, I'm walking along, da da da, da 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 da. Then I stop, da 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 da. I turn around, you know. So it's really kind of really, I don't want to say stupid, but very specific details. For me, music's a lot about motion. You know, we're moving through a phrase, we're moving through an excerpt. We have to take time to breathe. You know, maybe sometimes we see a flower, that catches our attention. And even the idea of just like looking away, you know, will change how you are playing a note, you know. And it's those tiny little things when you listen to a really great player and you sit down and you analyze what are they really doing with their bow or what really happened to that note. It is amazing the complexity that happens, and just we don't even notice it. We just know that's a great player. But you sit down and try and figure out why is that person such a great player. You know, it's these tiny things that we may not really hear, but we kind of recognize at a different level that just suddenly goes, wow, that was great. What did they do? So one of the ways I feel like we get to that is by working through very specific things, and the other great thing is nobody knows what you are thinking, hopefully, while you're playing.
Yeah.
And so you can think whatever you want, as long as you are able to like use that as a way to really express completely your feeling about a phrase, about, anything, the direction, all that sort of stuff. I feel like the more specific we can be, the more successful we'll be in actually producing that.
Hmm. I could not agree with everything you said more. Yes. And I think people underestimate how much work that mental preparation is. It's a
Mm-hmm.
real intentional effort. I think that a lot of times this is what I hear all the time is, oh, I didn't visualize, or I didn't meditate because I just had to practice. And then what we do is we practice and then we practice more and then we practice more, but we don't develop the skills to bridge the gap between the practice room and the stage so that when we hop on stage, we don't have the skills to handle the overthinking that happens, the spiraling thoughts that assault us as we're performing. We don't know how to handle these nerves because we haven't done it in the practice room over and over and over again. And I love what you're saying about musicality and developing these very specific stories because that allows us to enter more of this right brain part of us. Now, I know left brain, right brain, this is slowly being debunked scientifically, but I'll just go with that because people know what I mean by this. So, as we perform, if we're still stuck in how to execute things, then that can really hold us back. It makes us a little bit more rigid. But when we're really prepared, when we're well prepared, and we give into the story, this is it makes it easier for us to express and let go and enter that flow state that is so elusive at times, right?
Yes, I totally agree. And I think there's a fallacy when we look at great players, we say, wow, they're just like totally into it. But like you said, we have no idea all of the work that goes into it. I mean, as a musician, I mean, I can say, wow, they can really play the violin. That's amazing. But you don't also know all the mental and artistic work they've done to get there.
Yeah.
So that's true. I think also, one of the things I've been thinking about is this idea of holding a duality. You're right that when we are playing, we want to kind of be transcending that, the technical aspect. But I know that for myself, what I try and do is go back and forth.
Hmm.
So hopefully in my technical preparation, it's like as solid as it can be, but there's always that big shift. So what I do is I'll stick with, sort of my artistic, I'm just letting myself play. But certain times when I need to like to really make sure that I nail something technical, my brain kind of drops down from the artistic to the technical, going, okay, don't forget, this is what we're going to do. And this is where that kind of slow practice comes in, where you go, okay, I have practiced this shift. I know exactly how far that is. And I'm going to just like zone into my body and know that I'm going to nail it. And it's like, yeah, I nailed it. Great, let's go on. And I can then like go, oh, this is so beautiful over here. So I think this idea of constantly going back and forth, and maybe it's just my ADHD brain, but I jump around a lot. I'm trying to like cover a whole spectrum of preparation, whether it's mental, it's artistic, it's physical, it's technical, all these things are all happening at the same time. So I think you can't go into something and say, oh, I'm just going to be like in the zone. Well, being in the zone may mean we're like constantly going back and forth. I'm checking in with my mental state. I'm checking in. Am I really like getting that beautiful sound? And oh, don't forget to vibrate more here. So there's a lot going on. And I think it's totally, I think that's how successful musicians do it. I mean, I see my colleagues around me, we're all like going, what's that fingering? And then just really like laying into things. So um, I think it's having a balance and the ability to bounce back and forth successfully that really will kind of helps our preparation for really playing well under pressure.
Oh, yes. I love that term, that duality for this phenomenon. I can absolutely um, agree with you that this is very needed to have that flexibility that you mentioned. Completely
Mhm.
agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Gloria, you had mentioned to me that there were some podcasts that had an effect on your thinking, and I'd love for the listeners to maybe get a little some information on those podcasts.
Well, one of my favorite podcasts is called Hidden Brain by Shankar Vedantam. And Shankar talks to just people from all over the sort of psychological spectrum. He talks a lot about how we learn, how we think, how we feel. And by listening to this podcast, I've learned so much and been able to apply so much of sort of general psychology, I guess, to how I think about audition preparation. I feel like another podcast, another writer I really like is Brene Brown. And this is really a hard, I think, for a lot of musicians. I mean, it was for me, this idea of vulnerability. you know?
Yeah.
But in fact, when we can like really show what we are thinking and feeling and be totally okay with that, that's when we are able to connect with those parts of people. When you listen to a great musician or you listen to something, you just think, oh, I feel that. It's because they're feeling it too. And because they've had the ability to access that part of themselves and then share it, warts and all with you.
Yeah.
So vulnerability is a big part of it, which I love. Brene Brown talks about a lot of aspects of just basically showing up in the world in a very, um, I think, honest way. And even though you're afraid, she still does it.
Yeah.
I think the other person whose writings I love is Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Buddhist monk. And I find that when I read writings by him, I just feel very calm. And I feel like, oh, it brings it back into perspective. And I love that sort of duality of this idea of the psychology from Hidden Brain, sort of the emotional aspect of Brene Brown, and then, of course, the very spiritual part of the Buddhist monk.
Mm.
So I'd like to try and draw from all those different aspects because I think that when we are playing our instruments and trying to access that part of ourselves, we do need to go into those sort of dark crevices, whether we
Yes.
want to or not, because that's kind of what makes things interesting. And those are the parts of our personality and our being that I think other people recognize and actually respond to because we're not all happy. We're all not wanting to go there, but yet that's kind of an important part of just kind of being human.
Mm. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing these. I think that all of those aspects that you mentioned, they map onto the artistic world so well, onto our artistic life, onto the challenges that we face as artists. So
Mm-hmm.
very inspiring. And I know about Brene Brown, but I did not know about Hidden Brain. So that's one I'm going to check
Yeah,
out
check it out for
for
sure.
sure. Gloria, if that works for you, how about a round of rapid fire questions?
Okay, let's try it.
And I have a brand new question today that I want to start asking my guests. And I'm so grateful that you agreed to be the first victim of this question. In the work that I do with the clients, that I have a big part of what we do is untangle everything at the root. And for me, that means to understand how we're feeling, understand what we're thinking. And I profoundly feel the effect of what one piece of insight can have on our life. What one thought that we repeat to ourselves over and over can change things. How those beliefs that we hold impact our everyday life, but also change the course of our entire journey. So I
Mhm.
would love to know if there is such a thought for you, or such a maybe a sentence that runs in your mind throughout the day that is either helpful or maybe one of them changed your life.
I would have to say that the one sentence that I grew up with was from my father, who said, if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Mm.
And this was something that I grew up always hearing. And I feel like that kind of got me through the many auditions that I took. Because also, when you think about that, the way I interpreted it was not so much with any sort of judgment, but if at first you don't succeed, try again. And it's actually kind of a positive thought. So I mean, I bring it into everything I do, whether it's like working out or playing the cello or, trying to climb a hill or something like that. And I think that what I love about that is it's not non-judgmental. So if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Exactly. And then it really reframes the idea that not everything needs to be perfect. And
Right.
we shouldn't expect to succeed at first in everything.
Right. And in fact, you, as you learn so much from your quote unquote failures, what we deem as failures. But the idea of just brush it off, keep going, let's just give it another shot can be very, very helpful.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. How about a habit that you have that you think contributed to your success?
okay, one of the things that I really believe in as a musician is scales and arpeggios.
Mm,
And they may seem kind of stupid, and it's like, really, do I need to practice this? And the answer to that is absolutely. And I always do scales and arpeggios because it's kind of meditative. I can like fall out of bed in the morning, have my coffee on my side and start playing scales, and it's a way of waking up just my brain. And so scales and arpeggios. The other thing is very slow practice.
mm,
Really, really slow practice, I think, really helps change someone's playing for the
yes.
better.
I agree with you with the scales so much. I was joking with a colleague the other day. We were rehearsing at the opera house, and we're going through the first readings through the opera, and every passage would stop, and I would kind of lean forward and say, "Yeah, that's why we practice scales." You know, that's
Exactly right.
what we do all the time. What skills do you think young musicians studying today should acquire in addition to learning to play their instruments?
Patience,
Mm.
patience and acceptance. Playing an instrument, hopefully, if this is the path that you choose, will last your entire life. And at my age, after playing for so many years, I'm still trying to get better. But also knowing that at the beginning of your journey, knowing that if you stick with it, every year you will improve. You will always become a better musician as long as you are aware that this is something you want to do. So I would say patience. The other one is courage. It takes a lot of courage to do what we do and to be open, even if somehow maybe your journey doesn't go quite the way you think it might or that you thought it should go. There are opportunities at every turn, and to really look for those opportunities and to maximize them.
Mhm. Amazing. How do you maintain peak form? I always struggle with this word in English. How do you maintain peak form? My kids always make fun of me while juggling, such a busy schedule. You have a family, you have pets. How does that look like for you?
I think it's being able to prioritize. Hopefully, when you have achieved a certain level of playing, it's like when we play scales and arpeggios, when we're reading tons and tons of music, it's like, okay, I know I can rely on that. So I think the other thing is looking at, I mean, we have so much new music at the Philharmonic because for some reason they like to give us brand new pieces all the time that are hard. So what we've all gotten really good at is just looking at a part and saying, I know I can see exactly what it is I need to do. So being able to prioritize, knowing how to practice it, so because we don't have a whole lot of time, from week to week, saying, if I practice it this way, I will learn it faster. So a lot of times if I have like lots and lots of notes, I'll practice it in sections and then I'll kind of bridge those sections. A lot of it is, how we practice mentally. So I think
Yes.
prioritization and knowing how to practice efficiently.
Mind over finger.
Exactly right.
How about a piece of advice that you would like to share with the listeners?
What I would say is always be kind to yourself because what we do is difficult, and it's easy to get discouraged, especially when we're taking auditions. So be kind to yourself, say nice things to yourself, take a break when you need it. I
Mm,
think what I would love to say is you do not have to spend 6 hours a day in the practice room. I mean, you just don't. And to be able to be smart about things, but also treat yourself with kindness. Because I think the other thing is, I feel like you cannot learn, you cannot get better unless you are in an environment of acceptance and kindness. And it's your job to create that for yourself because nobody else lives in here except you. And while it's wonderful to have, parents, to have teachers, to have colleagues who are supportive, it's really important that you do it for yourself because you're the one living in here. And if you don't accept and create a kind space for yourself, it's going to be harder to succeed.
yes. Love that. Thank you so much. Gloria, the last thing I'll ask for is a quick, actionable tip that the listeners could implement today in their musical lives. What do you have for us?
I would just say practice slowly and listen really carefully to
Mm,
what it is, the sound that you're making, and see, how can I change this? How can I make it more beautiful or more, whatever the character is? And just, I would say take one measure just one measure, and see what you can do with it and different ways you can play it.
Mhm. That's perfect. Let's go right there. Gloria, tell us everything about where we can find you and all of the wonderful offerings that you have.
You can find me at my website, www.auditionconfidential.com. I'm also on Instagram in the same name. Um, one of the things that I'm doing most recently, I mean, I give courses, but I'm actually launching a course in the next couple of weeks, which is specifically for cellists, which will take you through the entire, basically 11 of the most asked for excerpts. We'll do a deep dive. I'll have a set number of playing participants along with unlimited number of auditors. And the backbone of this particular course is a video series that I created called the Cello Excerpt Masterclass. And in this video series, what I do is I go through these 11 most asked for excerpts. I play them, I take them apart, I tell you best ways to practice it, what the audition committee is listening for, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, you know, and along with the video series comes my parts with my fingerings and bowings and sort of a PDF that talks a little bit more about the most important parts about every excerpt. So that is coming up starting March 2nd. And you can find out all about that on my website.
Wonderful. I'm going to put all of the links in the show notes of this episode. It sounds to me like if anyone listening is a cellist, they should absolutely sign up for it, either as a participant or also as a, what do you call it?
Auditor.
An auditor.
Auditor.
Here's my French side coming out again. But that sounds to me very interesting for any string player, actually, or maybe even wind players, brass players interested about auditioning and maybe understanding a little bit more about how that works for us. Sounds like absolutely priceless information.
Thank you so much.
Gloria, thank you so much for coming on the show and for this gift of your insight and wisdom today.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for asking me.